May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I hope you all are having a wonderful start to your summer. I am just returning, as in last night, from a family reunion in Oregon and a week at Camp Stevens, our diocesan church camp. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard me talk about Camp Stevens before. I work there every summer. I have since I've been ordained for a week or two, serving as a chaplain to the camp. And each camp session over the summer has about 100 kids and the associated counselors and staff that are required to make the place hum. Camp Stevens is a special place. It's high up in the mountains near Julian, and a place where many lives are changed. One of the things I really love about being at Camp Stevens is their focus on environmental education and sustainability. The kids at each camp session learn about growing food, and sometimes they'll even harvest the food that they'll eat for dinner that night. There are all kinds of educational activities related to the care of God's creation, including one of my favorites, which is seed bombs. Have you ever heard of seed bombs? Okay, well that's good. So to make a seed bomb, you take some clay, some compost, whatever seeds you want, and a little bit of water. You mix it all together, and then you lay it out flat and cut it into smaller squares. And the traditional way of making a seed bomb is to, mold it into a ball. But at camp, we do things like form it into mythical creatures and aliens, just for fun. And when the seed bomb is dry, it's ready to go. So the next step is to pick a place that is in need of seeds, maybe a vacant lot or a patch of unused soil, and launch the bomb, and then wait. Any idea what will happen? Well, some seeds are going to get eaten by birds, right? Because that's what birds do. Some will germinate, although they won't reach full maturity because, for whatever reason. Maybe there's not enough water, or maybe the soil wasn't good for them. And then there will be some seeds that germinate and mature and make more seeds, and the cycle will repeat itself. So by launching one seed bomb, you're really spreading many seeds over time. Now, does that sound familiar? A little bit like today's parable? Today's parable is most often called the parable of the sower. The sower goes out to sow. That's what we hear at the very beginning. It's also called the parable of the four soils. The path, which is where the birds come and eat the seeds. The rocky soil, where the seeds can't dig into the ground and take root. The soil that has thorns and brambles, which choke out the good seeds. And then finally the healthy soil, where the seeds can grow and take root and mature. Sometimes it's called the parable of the miraculous yields, which points to the last part of the parable, where the seeds, which had good soil to take root in, grew and yielded this miraculous crop. What strikes me most about the parable, though, is the sower, and the way the sower goes about his work. I mean, when I think about planting a garden at my house, I have raised beds, and I make sure that the soil is good, and I've got irrigation, and I put the plants just right there. That's not what this sower is doing. This sower is taking seeds and throwing them everywhere. He throws his seeds out on the ground, and he lets them fall where they may. He is an enthusiastic and hopeful sower, casting seeds everywhere. This says a lot about God's love. God's love isn't like me planting a garden at my house in my little raised beds where everything is just right and I know that they have the best chance. God's love is cast everywhere, always enthusiastic and hopeful, always being sown in our hearts. Then we come to us. I think it's tempting to identify with one type of soil here. Oh, I'm like the path, or I'm like the rocky soil. But I believe we have all types of soil in us. Sometimes God's love falls on the paths inside us, and those seeds get taken away. Sometimes the seeds take root, but the rocks are too much and they just can't hold on. Sometimes the cares and the occupations of the world, the lure of wealth, as the gospel says, takes us away from the seeds and what God is trying to grow in us. And then there are those moments of grace when we are ready to receive, when life aligns with the sower's work and it takes root and makes a difference. I see these moments of grace a lot at Camp Stevens, especially with some of the more vulnerable children who come to camp. One of the reasons I love camp also is because it has a strong history of offering camperships to kids in need, particularly kids who come out of the foster care system, as well as refugee children. We always have a solid core of refugee children at camp. They are often the ones that I can see really changed in this experience of finding God's love in community and in nature. And one summer, there was a boy that I remember very well that was a little different. He was 10 years old, and he had come out of a home with some pretty severe abuse. He had been bounced around from group home to group home, and his family was no longer intact. His connection with them was minimal. In so many ways, he had the worst of all worlds. He was living as if he was an orphan that had this horrible history of abuse and didn't have really even a solid group home to call home. He was a difficult kid for the camp staff as well. The counselors, most of whom are between the ages of 16 to 18, really struggled. And the staff members who sort of oversee each group of kids with the counselors, they had difficulty with him too. He was angry and resistant and disruptive. He was mean to other kids. It was really hard. Nothing seemed to work. Every night we meet as a staff to talk over the day, and toward midweek, the staff member who worked most closely with this boy was near his boiling point. He expressed his frustration and said, "I wish he could just let go and receive all the good stuff we are offering him here. This is a safe place for him. I wish he could just let go of his anger and his defensiveness and receive." Another member of the staff said something in response that I will never forget. She said, "There is no way this boy can let go of his defenses. He needs them for every day of his life when he's not at camp. And he's only at camp for a week. But that does not mean that he is not receiving something wonderful by being here. We may not get the benefit of seeing what a difference camp is making in his life. But the important thing to know is that we are planting the seeds in this boy, and anything that we plant is worthwhile. It's never wasted." Such true words, such God words. Whether we are talking about the holy seeds of the good news of God's love that God sows in us, or the good news of God's love that we share with others, all of it, no matter where it falls, is good. It's God's way to sow with such enthusiasm and hope. It's our way to ready ourselves to receive and to continue the cycle. Now we can choose what kind of soil we will be for God's love, for all that God is calling us to be and to become. We can make a choice to engage our faith, to be open to God's direction, and to allow these seeds to take root in us. That's the beautiful thing about God's grace. It's never wasted. It's never forced upon us. And as soon as we take the first step, as soon as we open our hearts just a little, this enthusiastic, hopeful, love-casting God of ours will meet us there.